Exactly. And Rodrigo, what you're hitting on are security principles. And those security principles, as you said, yes, it's common knowledge, but it's not always common practice.
Hello everyone, welcome again to what I like to call the best day of the week. Today our guest is Ed Adams, CEO of Security Innovation. With so many years of experience, he's gonna blow our mind with so many content. We're gonna talk about cloud migration, risk management, artificial intelligence, machine learning, DevOps, DevSecOps. It's gonna be amazing, I'm sure. And if you like this content, please hit the like button. But before you continue, please subscribe and activate the notification bell so you don't miss anything in the future. Let's go. Ed, thank you very much for joining me today. But before we start anything, why don't you introduce yourself?
Of course, of course. My name is Ed Adams. I'm the president and CEO of Security Innovation. That's a company that helps organizations that build software, operate software, and defend software, and do so more securely through training and security assessments. I also have a monthly talk show called Ed Talks, where I bring three cybersecurity experts together and we talk about different topics that are of interest. For example, this month we're talking about the SolarWinds hack with Microsoft and Equifax. So should be a good one.
That's amazing, Ed. And how long you have been in the industry, Ed?
So I joined the cybersecurity industry, let's see, gosh, it's going on 18 years at this point. So I joined Security Innovation as a board member in September 2002, and then I signed on as their CEO in October of 2003. So 17 and a half years as the CEO of Security Innovation, and but along the way we've done a lot of different things. We've sold a 100-person division to Raytheon, we sold a 40-person division to Qualcomm, we've made a couple of acquisitions. But short answer, 17 and a half years directly in the cybersecurity industry. And before that, I spent, 5 or 6 years in the software quality industry working for a company called Rational Software, which is now part of IBM.
That's amazing, a lot of history. I'm thrilled to have you here in this channel today. I'm sure we're gonna have a lovely conversation.
Happy to be here.
But Ed, what I would like to start talking to you, a couple of weeks ago, you wrote a post in Forbes where you shared your vision about the 5 trends for 2021 related to cybersecurity. Do you mind? I would like to start with this post for you to explain to this audience about your 5 priorities for this year.
Yes, of course. So the first trend that I commented on, I called it the cloud giveth and the cloud taketh away. And what that really means is that by the time the pandemic hit, many organizations had already started moving to the cloud, but as of about a year ago, it became an absolutely mandatory thing to do. And whether it was retailers that had to launch new lines of business, restaurants that all of a sudden couldn't have people inside and had to pivot to an e-commerce model or delivery, a lot of organizations rushed to the cloud. And it's fantastic because the cloud enables a lot of these real-time services and you can spin up infrastructure very quickly. However, when you're doing that, a lot of times folks don't quite understand the security implications. And we had a lot of situations where companies spun up a cloud infrastructure and then they had a lot of their data sitting in a completely unencrypted S3 bucket or Amazon data bucket, which led to, I can't even call it data breaches because the data was served there on a platter for folks, unencrypted. But there was also a need to all of a sudden really try to understand cloud services and cloud APIs so you can tie into your systems. And it's just something that is not as well understood as it could be from a security perspective. So as much as the instant always on infrastructure provides nice flexibility, it also provides a lot of security problems that folks have to be aware of. So that was number one.
Can I ask one question about this one, Ed, before we proceed to number two? We as security guys, of course, for us is like we want to apply all the security controls every single time, right? To be able to protect as much as it is possible. But we know that when we are dealing with the senior leadership, there's one factor, which is the risk factor, that saying that, okay, what are the risks and what our risk tolerance related to that specific data. So there is also this, we need to wait a little every single time to make sure that, okay, do I want to do this movement fast, but of course I can have this type of issues, or I want to hold this migration because the risk is too high. Do you think that this situation with this rapid cloud migration is more related to the lack of knowledge of the senior leadership, or they really go thoroughly on the risk tolerance analysis and saying, okay, I think we can go fast because our risk tolerance is high for that specific situation? What I'm trying to get from you is more, it was like without thinking these movements because they need to do that fast, or do you think that they thought thoroughly and okay, they decided to do in a proper way, having all the risks balanced at some point?
Yeah, and listen, Rodrigo, I'm both a security professional and a CEO. So I often argue with myself, right? Move fast, move fast. No, move carefully, move carefully. But it's our job as security professionals to make sure that our executives are at least aware of the risks. And especially, what happened last spring with the pandemic is a lot of organizations were forced to move to the cloud very quickly, and they had to because their business depended on it. And those that had good security teams that could at least help them understand and appreciate the risks that they might be inheriting with a move to the cloud fared a lot better. And some of them just didn't have that security maturity and rushed there anyways. But it's really our responsibility as security professionals to make sure that our executives are at least aware, so they can make an informed risk-based decision.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect. So you can move on, Ed, to your second tip.
Yes, well, I'll be happy to, but I think numbers 2 and 3 are things you want to talk about later, which might be around artificial intelligence, machine learning, and DevOps.
Yeah.
So I'll defer a little bit, and I'll jump down to 4 and 5 because they are actually related. Mm-hmm. Number 4 being the work from home will continue to expose weak spots. And this is not just because of the rush to the cloud, but also the rush to work from home. And I had many clients where almost overnight, they're not introducing their home Wi-Fi system, their home endpoints, their home devices into the corporate infrastructure, sometimes unwittingly, and sometimes without using things like secure VPN. So this is another challenge point for a lot of IT and security professionals is all of a sudden your attack surface has exploded with all of your employees working from home, and you don't have the perfect visibility into all of the endpoints and the IT infrastructure that you might have in an office environment. And that's not going to change for a while. I know many organizations aren't even thinking about going back into the office until July, and sometimes October with some organizations. So it's going to continue to force security professionals to be extra diligent, but it's also going to force end users to be careful as well. And that's related to number 5, which is the rise of ransomware. With the advent of these work from home rush, also became a rush of cyber criminals pushing ransomware and phishing attacks, sometimes targeted phishing attacks. And in fact, I think I referenced a data point from Cybersecurity Ventures that predicted there was going to be a ransomware attack every 10 or 11 seconds in 2021, which is really frightening, especially when you consider that we have already lost human lives to ransomware. Last year, there was a situation where an entire hospital network ended up going down because of ransomware, a ransomware attack on their IT system. And the hospitals had to turn away ambulances with patients in them and divert them to other hospitals. And patients died en route because they couldn't get that care quickly enough. So we've already had that unfortunate, crossing of the cyber safety line. And I think that's going to continue as well in 2021.
I read this article too, and so sad, right, that we need to reach that point to lose some lives because of that. And this cybersecurity venture, they also mentioned that the cost damage for cyber crime, all types of cyber attacks, can reach $6 trillion in 2021. So we are talking about the 30 largest economic in the world, just after US and China. So you can imagine, right, how much we can contribute to the society if we don't have this type of attacks. 6 trillion is like, it's too much. It's too much. I'm speechless, actually. I was speechless when I wrote that and I read that.
It's phenomenal, but you also see how lucrative cybercrime can be. And that's why, we've seen a shift, away from, so the individual, hacker or hacktivist group, and much more on cybercrime from, an organized crime perspective, because financially it's just too lucrative for those organized crime syndicates to ignore anymore. And it's just a fact, like you said, that it would be the third largest economy in the world after the US and China. It's just mind-blowing.
Exactly, mind-blowing. But doing this relationship between, right, the working from home and some ransomwares attacking all other types of malwares, as I said before, right, I always try to put this into perspective about risk tolerance, but this could sound a little bit harsh. But my perspective is, for this type of situation, I'm a little bit more strict when discussing about bringing your own device to a corporate network. I want to say 100% against, but I would say 99% against, because all the exposure that these kind of situations can bring the company can generate so many bad things that I want to avoid that at 100% every single time. I don't think there is any risk that's gonna show me that we need to allow a bring your own device, or just allow people to work from home without being connected to a VPN. I'm a little bit strict on this one, but I truly don't see any other way. We know that there is a huge can have a huge revenue impact, can increase costs, but there is always this balance, right? Do you want to be exposed in this way? I'm not sure if you agree with that, Ed.
Yeah, and again, we have the challenge of the executives. We really need to convince the executives in our companies, of that risk in order for them to endorse the policy. And a lot of times, those C-level executives are the biggest problems for us, right? Because CEOs love their iPads and they want to bring all their cool gadgets and everything with them into the work environment, and doing so can really significantly increase your attack surface. So once again, I take a lot of responsibility as a cybersecurity professional to make sure that education process has happened, because those types of policies have to be set from the top down. And of course, you have thousands and thousands of small and medium-sized businesses where they might not even have anyone in IT, or it's just outsourced on a part-time basis. And educating those folks becomes even more challenging, because the last thing they're thinking about is security, right? If you think about someone that owns a Dunkin' Donuts franchise or a Planet Fitness franchise, right? They're fitness fanatics, or they last thing they're thinking about is IT, and certainly not cybersecurity. So it's a real challenge to make sure that those folks are aware of what the potential damage of things like cyberware and phishing attacks can bring to their business as well, because it's very easy for a franchise to just go completely dark with one single, with one single attack. So it's really important to get the word out to those folks as well.
Exactly. No, that's a very good point, Ed, because I don't think there is there is enough money that we can put in don't talking about education, right? It's our responsibility to make sure all the technical checklist is being ticked. We provide education, training, awareness every single time to everyone within the organization, because as everyone said, right, the weakest link on this whole security chain it's the human, right? And
always
at some point we need their help, so also their help to make sure that we won't be exposed to anything.
Yep, exactly. And honestly, some of the independent standards bodies do a lot to help. So, for example, the PCI Security Council, it gets a bad rap from a lot of organizations, but they did really set the mark to say, listen, if you are going to store, process, or transmit any type of payment card information, you need to adhere to these standards. And they're not just sort of issuing this edict without providing some assistance. They also provide a lot of free educational resources in the forms of webinars and trainings, especially targeted to small and medium-sized businesses that don't have a large IT team. The Amazons and Walmarts of the world, those level 1 merchants, they're a completely different class. But the PCI Council has actually done a pretty good job trying to get that education out to the smaller and medium-sized businesses, so they can at least be aware of what it means to have some type of data security protections in place. So have to give them a little bit of credit and kudos. And then also some of the security awareness training providers, especially like the KnowBe4s of the world, they made a conscious effort to go after small and medium-sized businesses, and they've done a really good job. So I think we're making some good progress. In certainly 2021 is looking a lot more promising than than previous years. But do have to acknowledge organizations like the PCI Council for putting in that effort.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Absolutely, Ed. And Ed, let's talk about your fourth trend for 2021, which is machine learning, right?
Yes.
As you mentioned there, robotics are coming, right? That's an amazing analogy.
Yes, absolutely. We've seen a lot of artificial intelligence make its way into our lives. Whether it's you have an Echo from Amazon, and I'm resisting using the name because I don't want to activate her, because I've got one sitting 10 feet away from me as well. But that type of artificial intelligence, machine learning, from a convenience perspective, has been great. But like most of these types of convenience factors, a lot of times they are rushed into adoption without consideration of security, privacy, etc. Now, I have an Amazon Echo sitting in my house. I actually took the time to read the privacy policies and all of the fine print that comes along with it, and you are giving up the right to allow this machine to listen to your conversations if you have it in your house. I'm okay with that, but a lot of folks don't recognize that just by purchasing and turning it on, you are agreeing to that. Now, that's a very simple example from a consumer perspective. When you then take it to the cybersecurity world, we have some emerging technologies like CART, continuous automated red teaming. And organizations like Scythe and Fire Compass are offering some pretty innovative solutions in that area. But that's to help us defend. The attackers are also using artificial intelligence and machine learning on the attack side, and they're doing it with everything from personality or identity theft with deep fakes. There are some really frighteningly accurate deep fake videos and images that machine learning have created. But also attackers can use artificial intelligence to make their attacks more impactful. And just taking the in the SolarWinds, hack, for example, it was ingenious that the attacker ended up hooking into the build process, in SolarWinds for the Orion program. But the malware that they implanted in there was really, really smart, because as it got deployed, it would start looking for specific assets as it's deployed. Then it would go back into hiding. If it were probed, it would erase its traces. It was very, very smart. So they built in a lot of that artificial intelligence into that malware. So now we're seeing a combination of artificial intelligence implanted with malware, including a very ingenious attack for an advanced persistent threat. I mean, it's getting pretty frightening these days. Now, on the positive side, we can also use artificial intelligence to help from the defensive perspective. And this is where things like DevOps has made some really significant strides. So, DevOps is all about automating as much as you can and facilitating good communication across the teams. Well, one of the things that we see with DevOps is a lot of software engineers are spinning up infrastructure. Well, if you can spin up infrastructure from a known, good, secure template, then you're really very far ahead of the game. As opposed to just spinning up something from scratch every single time. If you can utilize a known good template, and whether it's a Docker image or anything that's of known good secure state, you start from that and then build on top of it. Then you're really kind of ahead of the game. And this is where a lot of that artificial intelligence and machine learning can come into play, because teams end up spending a lot less time trying to build secure infrastructures as opposed to starting from something that is a known good state and then putting the business logic on top of that. So that's really, again, another place where I think we're going to make some positive progress with respect to DevOps.
Yeah, one topic related to that, right, about machine learning, artificial intelligence. I saw an interview from Elon Musk a couple of weeks ago, and he mentioned, right, that we should be afraid from machine learning, what this can be done in the future, right? So everyone needs to be afraid and take into consideration to have some serious discussions. And of course, he talked on a broader term about all the single applications that we can have using machine learning, artificial intelligence. But if we talk on the cybersecurity world, as you said, right, the attackers are already using, because the algorithm can be there 24/7, right? And human cannot be there every single time. So we need to leverage all these good practices on the defense side to do the good things that to prevent this type of attacks. Of course, I'm gonna call the old stuff, right? To make sure it's secure, 2FA, right? Encryption, etc. This is, I would say, common knowledge. Needs to be there, of course. But if we're not talking about machine learning, how we can predict attacks or analyze this different type of behavior, so we can block that possible attack, we're gonna continue to be exposed.
Exactly, and Rodrigo, what you're hitting on are security principles, and those security principles, as you said, yes, it's common knowledge, but it's not always common practice, and that's really the challenge, right? Proper authentication, defense in depth, things that cybersecurity professionals have been talking about for years, but they become even more important with instant cloud infrastructure, AI fueled attacks, because what are the things they're going to be looking for? They'll be looking for weak passwords. They'll be looking for lack of two-factor authentication. They'll be looking for, the improperly implemented principles. Why? Because those are the easiest things to find. They're also the easiest things to automate. And when it comes to machine learning, it's all about automation. You give the machine a pattern, you say, look for this pattern. If you find this pattern, do this thing. And that makes security principles all the more important in 2021 than they were last year or the year before or the year before that. Because the more we automate and the more we depend on software and the more we depend on machines, the more important it is for us to have the foundational base secure. And that's where principles come in. So, I love the fact that you called that out. I agree with you completely. Common knowledge, but not common practice.
Not a common practice. Amazing. I'll take note of this phrase, Ed. But you also mentioned about DevOps, right? Because as you mentioned on your post, and your post would be on the description of this video, of course, that we still need to continue to talking about application security. There is, again, right, common knowledge, but not necessarily a common practice. Now I'm going to use this term, but things are evolving every single day. So now we are talking about DevOps. It's not a single application, single code. Now we have containers, microservices. So we need to know how to secure the whole system, not specific, only that piece of code. But I'm still seeing, Eddie, I would like to grab your thoughts on that. I don't want to say resistance, of course, because it's not, but the speed to start talking about DevSecOps is not as fast as I would like it to be. I don't know why yet. It's something that I keep thinking why we are not changing the whole mindset to start talking about DevSecOps and not only DevOps. And before you answer this question, it was a long time ago, but this phrase it was like stuck in my mind when I read the Phoenix Project, right? Like this famous book. And on the very first pages, the author he put himself on the perspective saying that the security team. Then of course he changed his mind, but the security team is there to make their life more difficult. And I said, no, I cannot hear that. I cannot read that. And I was sad when I read that, because the whole, of course, the books about DevOps, but they keep forgetting the security team. Now we're talking about DevSecOps, but still, it's not consistent as I would like it to be. Not sure what you think about that, Ed.
For me, it all comes down to the fact that it is software. And if you think about software, in 2004, and I just found this slide the other day. I created a slide in 2004, and this slide has a pyramid, and at the bottom of the pyramid is functionality, and then the next is performance, and the next is reliability, and at the top of the pyramid is security. And what I was talking about in 2004 is that security should be thought of as just another aspect of software quality, like functionality and performance and reliability and accessibility, etc. But you know what? It's not. It wasn't in 2004, and it's not in 2021. And I think that's the fundamental problem. But I understand it, because if you look at DevOps, I think about DevOps in three sort of different groups. You have the teams that build software, you have the teams that operate the software, like the IT organizations, then you have the teams that defend the software. That's you and I, the security teams. Well, that security team, that's the only group whose primary job is security. The other two groups, they have a job that's something other than security. So what we have to do is to get them to understand and think about security as part of their day jobs, as part of their regular jobs, which is something other than security. And that's a difficult thing to do, because teams that build just want to build, and teams that operate, they just want to make sure that all the services are available and all of the systems are up. They're not thinking about security necessarily. And we do have to get them to think about security, because it's critically important. It's even more important because now most software applications that are built aren't really coded from scratch. They're assembled from open source software, third-party components, commercial off-the-shelf software. So what we have to get those build teams to understand is, what security vulnerabilities might you be inheriting with this library you just pulled down from GitHub, or this open source software that you're using? Do you have access to the source code? And if you don't have access to the source code, how will you assess the security of these third-party components that you're using to build your system? And that's where the security team can really help. And I will reference a report that Gartner published, I think it was February of 2020, so exactly 1 year ago. It was called 3 Steps to Integrate Security into DevOps. And I'll send you the link if you want to reference it. But one of the things that they talked about was the creation of, they call it security coaches, but what you and I more commonly refer to it as security champions.
Mm-hmm.
And what the security champion is someone that's on the dev team, the build team, but they have security acumen and they talk with the developers and architects and quality assurance engineers about security. And because they speak the same language, they come from a development background. And the creation of security coaches, the security champions,
Mm-hmm.
Gartner actually recommends using a belt system, kind of like martial arts, white belt, yellow belt, black belt.
Nice.
And they even call out a very prescriptive way to up-level and educate the security coaches using a combination of formal training, whether it's computer-based training or instructor-led training, and most importantly, hands-on simulation exercises, kind of like wargaming or cyber ranges.
Interesting.
So you can translate that knowledge into skill, into mastery. And I use the analogy of golfing. I love to golf. I'm not particularly good at golf, but I still enjoy it. So the training part that Gartner's talking about is kind of like getting a lesson from a golf pro.
Mm-hmm.
And the golf pro will tell you, keep your left arm straight, shift your weight at this point. But after your training, you don't know if you can actually hit the darn ball straight, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what do? You go to the driving range, which is kind of like a cyber range, and you hit a real ball with a real club, and you practice your training to see if you actually have mastered the skill. And that's exactly what Gartner's talking about with their security coaches. Take training, but then also practice on things like cyber ranges, or go take a capture the flag exercise so you can master the skill. And I think it's I'm not always the biggest fan of Gartner, but I think that's a really, really good piece of research and advice that they published a year ago.
That's a very, very good one. But Ed, I am so sorry to say that I've already used all the time that I asked you. So it's so much information that I would like to talk to you. Like, we need to squeeze on this on this time frame. But Ed, I don't want to say thank you yet before giving you the chance to give your last message. Anything that you would like to share with the audience today?
The only thing that I'd like to share is I do want to stress the importance of education, end user education, technical developer education, and executive education. As you said, Rodrigo, the weakest link in our cybersecurity chain is the human. So I definitely want to encourage everyone to find appropriate cybersecurity training, make it role-based so it can be applied to the specific job function, and try to have it include some type of simulation. The Ponemon Institute recently published a report on effective cybersecurity education, and they had 17 different elements that they analyzed. And the two most effective were that it's cybersecurity training that matches to a job function, and cybersecurity training that includes some type of realistic simulation. So if you're looking for cybersecurity education, look for those two things first and foremost, and you'll have a more successful program.
That's perfect. A lot of knowledge. Ed, thank you very, very much for your participation today. I'm sure whomever is watching this will learn a lot.
I'd love to be on IT Think Tank again.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Ed. Have a nice rest of the day.
And same to you, my friend.
Bye-bye. What did I tell you? I knew that you would love this video. I think we should call this one a mini masterclass. What do you think? Guys, please check the description below to see the reference for everything that we discussed today. And guys, check out these videos here if you lost anything before in this channel. See you next time.